It started with the rumble of black SUVs speeding through Brooklyn's quiet streets, their tires screeching to a halt in front of the beloved old church. Federal agents swarmed the steps, securing the doors and wrapping the entrance in bright yellow tape. No one was allowed in or out. What had been a sanctuary for generations suddenly became a fortress of mystery. Whispers swept through the neighborhood. Theories sprang up as quickly as the cameras arrived. Could it have been a long-buried treasure unearthed during renovations? A forgotten vault of priceless artifacts? Or perhaps something darker, secrets too terrible to face the light of day? Then the unthinkable happened. 9 nuns were escorted out in handcuffs. The sight of these figures, once thought to be paragons of virtue, now shackled and escorted by FBI agents, left the community stunned. How could a house of worship, a symbol of peace and spiritual solace, have become the focus of a federal raid? The city buzzed with speculation. Reporters descended on the site, broadcasting live updates as residents peered through their windows, trading theories with their neighbors. Some believed the FBI had found evidence of a hidden network, illicit activities carried out beneath the very floorboards where people once knelt in prayer. Others were convinced it was all a mistake, a misunderstanding that had spiraled out of control. Yet, the agents said nothing. No statement was issued, no explanation provided. The silence only fed the suspense. The truth, when it finally emerged, would prove more shocking than anyone could have imagined. What could have driven the authorities to take such dramatic action against a place of worship? Whatever lay hidden within those walls had the power to alter the city's perception of one of its oldest sanctuaries forever. A vacant structure stood silently in Brooklyn, abandoned mid-construction. Over 5 years ago, development had started with the promise of a new landmark, but financial troubles halted the work. The skeletal remains of half-built walls and open doorways became a grim silhouette against the skyline, a reminder of what could have been. Yet, what happened within those walls turned the unfinished building into the stuff of local legend. Residents whispered about the strange occurrences that began shortly after construction stopped. On moonless nights, they claimed to see dark, flickering shadows moving across the upper floors, shadows that had no source. Some reported hearing the unmistakable cries of young women. These weren't faint whispers or distant murmurs. They were anguished wails, sharp and heart-wrenching, rising and falling as though someone or something was desperately calling for help. Brave souls who dared venture inside rarely spoke of what they encountered. The few who did emerge were visibly shaken, refusing to say what had frightened them so deeply. Stories spread through the neighborhood. A man, once a skeptic, swore he saw glowing eyes watching him from an upper window. Another reported hearing footsteps behind him, though the floor was covered in thick dust, undisturbed by any visible trace. These accounts soon became the bread and butter of local gossip. Some believed the building was cursed, others suspected foul play, perhaps criminal activity hidden in plain sight. No one knew for sure. In time, even the bravest among them avoided the site. Parents warned their children not to wander too close, while older residents recounted chilling tales to keep the younger generation at bay. Whatever was happening inside that abandoned building, it had turned a forgotten construction project into a place of dread, a haunted monolith looming over the streets of Brooklyn. As the unsettling incidents intensified and the haunting cries grew more frequent, the local community had enough. Groups of residents began visiting a well-known pastor at a prominent Brooklyn church, seeking his help. They hoped that if there was something supernatural in that building, the pastor could banish it and bring peace to their troubled neighborhood. At first, the pastor dismissed their concerns. Whispers of spirits and mysterious voices sounded like mere folklore. But as more and more residents came forward with the same harrowing tales, and as they provided audio and video recordings of the chilling screams, the pastor began to take their claims seriously. In one recording, a deep, mournful wail echoed through the vacant halls of the abandoned building. Another video showed the flickering of lights in windows that hadn't seen a working power line in years. The more he reviewed the evidence, the more the pastor's confidence wavered. His normally calm demeanor cracked as he realized that something truly unexplainable might be lurking inside. What truly unsettled the pastor were the consistency of these reports and the fear in his congregation's eyes. These weren't just idle rumors. These were accounts from people he knew and trusted, people who didn't scare easily. Faced with mounting pressure, he decided he couldn't ignore the situation any longer. This was no longer about folklore. It was about the growing anxiety in his community. The pastor resolved to confront whatever was causing these disturbances and, if necessary, rid the area of the dark presence that seemed to have taken hold of the building. The pastor, determined to dispel the fear gripping the neighborhood, announced that he would confront whatever was haunting the abandoned building. Late one evening, armed only with his faith and a few sacred relics, he entered the darkened structure alone. He spent over an hour inside, and when he finally emerged, he looked both exhausted and relieved. Speaking to a gathering of anxious residents, he claimed to have contained the presence. "Whatever was here," he told them, "has been dealt with." The community's relief was almost palpable. For weeks afterward, the eerie sounds and ghostly apparitions seemed to have vanished. No cries echoed from the building. No dark shadows flickered in the windows. People began to breathe easier, believing the ordeal was finally behind them. However, the peace didn't last. A month passed before the unsettling phenomena returned, and this time they came back with greater intensity. The cries that once seemed distant now felt closer, louder, and more frequent. Flickering shadows began darting across the walls at all hours of the day and night. Even those who had dismissed the previous occurrences as superstition now avoided the building, unwilling to risk encountering whatever was inside. Residents reported hearing heavy footsteps echoing from the upper floors. Some even claimed that the shadows themselves seemed to follow them as they walked past, as if something was watching from the darkened windows. A once lively street grew eerily quiet, with people crossing to the other side to avoid the structure entirely. As weeks went on, the disturbances only escalated. The cries grew more anguished, the shadows more frequent, and the fear more overwhelming. Even by daylight, no one dared to come close. The building now stood as a reminder that some mysteries, no matter how well-intentioned the efforts to resolve them, remain unresolved. A man, skeptical by nature and not one to believe in ghosts or supernatural creatures, found himself drawn to the mysterious sounds echoing from the abandoned building. The muffled cries and unexplained noises were unsettling, but his rational mind refused to accept that they were the work of spirits. Convinced there was a logical explanation, he decided to take action. Despite the neighborhood's warnings and pleas to let the matter go, he reported the strange occurrences to the local police. "Don't do it," his neighbors had urged. "Once the authorities get involved, they'll just make things worse. You don't know what you're getting into." But the man remained firm. "I'm not buying these ghost stories," he replied. "Something's off about that building, and it's not what people think. I need to let the police know before it's too late." He believed the building was being used for something sinister, but not in the way most imagined. While others feared spirits, he suspected criminals. It made more sense to him that someone was exploiting the building's reputation, using it to conceal illegal activities. Drugs, trafficking, or some kind of smuggling ring. Those seemed far more likely than the tales of apparitions. He refused to rely on hearsay or rumors. He was a practical thinker, someone who needed concrete answers rather than legends. So he made his case to the police. He described the strange noises, the unease that was spreading through the community, and his belief that human hands, not supernatural forces, were behind it all. Though his decision wasn't popular among his neighbors, he felt it was the right thing to do. "If we ignore it," he said, "we're just letting whoever's behind this get away with it." It was an unpopular choice, but his insistence came from a place of rational concern. He had no intention of letting fear or superstition dictate what needed to be done. By notifying the authorities, he set in motion the investigation that would eventually uncover the hidden truths behind the building's ominous reputation. 3 police officers, determined to uncover the truth, decided to enter the infamous building that had haunted Brooklyn's residents for months. They knew the risks, but they were trained professionals and confident in their abilities. On that fateful day, the officers crossed the threshold into the shadowy halls, ready to investigate. Almost immediately, things took a sinister turn. From outside, bystanders heard the muffled sound of the officers' footsteps, giving way to frantic shouts. Then came the unmistakable cries for help. People gathered on the street, staring at the building, terrified but powerless. The officers' voices grew more desperate, their cries echoing off the hollow walls. Suddenly, the screaming stopped. For a moment, there was an eerie silence, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Then, without warning, the crowd gasped in horror as the lifeless bodies of all 3 officers came tumbling from the roof. They hit the ground in a macabre heap, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. No one had seen them ascend to the roof. No one could explain how they had gotten there. Panic spread like wildfire. Onlookers screamed and fled the scene, unwilling to go near the building. Even those who had once dismissed the stories as exaggerations now believed that something deeply wrong was lurking within its walls. The mysterious deaths of these 3 officers quickly became a national sensation. News outlets reported the tragedy, speculating about what might have happened. Some suggested a freak accident, others whispered of curses and malevolent forces. Officially, no explanation was given, only that the investigation was ongoing. But for the people of Brooklyn, the message was clear. That building wasn't just a source of unease, it was a harbinger of death. From that day on, no one dared approach it, as the memory of those 3 officers' eerie demise left a chilling scar on the neighborhood's collective psyche. In January 2024, after the harrowing deaths of 3 officers and weeks of growing public anxiety, the FBI launched a large-scale search operation. Determined to uncover the truth, federal agents sealed off the surrounding area, combed through every room, and investigated every corner of the mysterious building. They vowed to leave no stone unturned, promising to bring clarity to the situation that had gripped Brooklyn in fear. What they found, however, was not what many had expected. Despite the eerie sounds and the tragic events that had taken place, there were no supernatural entities lurking within the walls. Instead, the FBI discovered something far more tangible and equally disturbing. Evidence emerged that the building had been inhabited by human beings, not spirits. There were multiple bodies scattered across different floors, as well as various items that pointed to a sinister purpose. When agents ventured into the building's basement, they stumbled upon the most shocking revelation of all: a hidden underground tunnel. This secret passage ran beneath the entire structure, snaking its way toward an unexpected destination. The discovery of the tunnel sent shockwaves through the community. News of this find spread rapidly, with speculation reaching a fever pitch. The exact purpose of the tunnel and who was using it remained unclear, but its mere existence hinted at a much larger operation than anyone had previously imagined. The FBI's findings confirmed one thing: the horrors tied to this building were not the work of ghosts or folklore. They were rooted in human actions, deeply sinister and thoroughly planned. The chilling discovery transformed what was once considered a simple haunting into a criminal investigation of unprecedented proportions. As the FBI's search team delved deeper into the structure, their flashlights cut through the dim basement, revealing a strange, narrow tunnel carved into the earth. The officers followed the damp, winding passage, their footsteps echoing softly against the earthen walls. What they found at the end stunned them. The tunnel, hidden for years beneath the building's foundation, led directly to the city's oldest and most iconic church. This was no coincidence. The passage wasn't just a crude burrow. It was carefully constructed, designed for a specific purpose. But who had built it and why? No one had any immediate answers. News of the tunnel's existence sent shockwaves through Brooklyn. The connection between the abandoned building and the revered church confounded everyone. People who once speculated about supernatural forces now wondered about human intentions. The revelation raised a barrage of questions. Who had the resources to construct such a hidden corridor? How long had it been there? And what dark secrets were hidden at its other end? Investigators turned their attention to the church itself. The nuns and priests who had served there for decades were now under scrutiny. Law enforcement officials began conducting interviews, combing through church records and examining any unusual activities. Each step brought more uncertainty than answers. The possibility that a sacred institution could be linked to something so nefarious left the community in shock. The church, once a pillar of faith and trust, now faced allegations that tarnished its reputation. As rumors spread, public outrage grew. People who had once sought solace within its walls now questioned its true purpose. The discovery of the tunnel was more than just a lead. It was a bombshell that changed the narrative entirely. Whatever had been hidden beneath the building, the church was now undeniably tied to it, leaving the entire community in a state of disbelief and suspicion. When investigators began questioning the priests and nuns of the church, suspicion quickly zeroed in on them. The tunnel connecting the building and the church raised too many unsettling questions. Could it be that the very individuals entrusted with the community's spiritual well-being were secretly using this passage for something far more sinister? The cries and screams heard from the building now took on a darker significance. What had truly been happening in the shadows? As the interrogation deepened, new evidence surfaced linking the priests and nuns to activities in the abandoned building. It became clear that the church leaders not only knew about the tunnel, but had been using it to travel between the two locations. More troubling, though, were the unexplained noises and eerie phenomena. How did they fit into this mystery? Was it all an elaborate ploy to keep people away, or something even more insidious? The case of the 3 police officers' deaths only heightened tensions. Investigators pressed harder, reopening the circumstances of their strange and untimely demise. It was then that threats began to emerge. Several officers working the case received chilling warnings. "Drop it, or you'll end up like the others," one message reportedly read. The specter of danger loomed large over the investigation, but the authorities refused to back down. By now, the community was in an uproar. What had once seemed like a sanctuary of faith was now a nexus of fear and suspicion. Whispers spread that the church's founder and a group of 9 nuns were at the heart of it all. The once revered leader and his closest followers were implicated in a conspiracy that shocked even the most skeptical observers. As public outrage mounted, the walls of secrecy surrounding the church began to crumble, revealing truths that would forever stain its sacred image. When the harrowing truth finally surfaced, it was revealed that the church, once considered a haven for the vulnerable, was hiding unspeakable horrors. Those who arrived seeking refuge, often orphaned or abandoned, found no safety within its walls. Instead, they fell victim to a grim scheme orchestrated by the very figures they had trusted most. The nuns, who outwardly appeared as caregivers and protectors, were at the heart of this dark operation. Using the secret tunnel beneath the church, they transported their victims to the abandoned building. There, in the shadows of secrecy, unimaginable acts took place. The bodies of these unfortunate men and women were exploited, their organs surgically removed and sold to hospitals and illegal buyers, generating millions of dollars for the conspirators. The horror didn't stop at organ trafficking. Many individuals were also smuggled out of the country, their lives traded away for profit. As the investigation deepened, each piece of evidence confirmed the church's grim reality. The nuns' apparent acts of kindness were nothing more than a facade, concealing one of the most heinous criminal operations in Brooklyn's history. The neighborhood, once proud of its historic landmark, now recoiled in disgust and disbelief. Authorities moved quickly to ensure justice was served. The 9 nuns who had played central roles in this operation, along with the church's pastor, were arrested and held accountable for their crimes. The church itself, once a symbol of community and compassion, was permanently sealed. It became a closed chapter in the city's history, a building that now stood as a grim reminder of the atrocities that had been committed under the guise of faith and charity. This revelation sent shockwaves through the community and beyond. What had once been a place of worship was now irreparably tarnished, leaving behind a legacy of betrayal and corruption.